Hello and welcome to this battle damage and weathering painting video. So a few people have asked me about the techniques I use when it comes to weathering my Umbral Wolves and the battle damage. So I thought while I'm finishing off the Repulsor Executioner, I'd show off which techniques I use, because it's a larger canvas, so it's easier to show. So I hope you all enjoy, and we'll get straight on with it. So the first thing I've been doing recently is mixing Typhus Corrosion and Martian Iron Crust together. This is to give off the impression of like dust and dirt and stuff getting in the component parts and into sort of the deep recesses, but also giving it a sort of oily texture. So it looks like it's not just picking up dirt and settling, but it's also mixing with maybe the oils that are coming off the vehicle, or like the chemicals and other liquids that may be around on the planet during the battle. So for the mix, I generally get a decent sized wad of whatever technical paint I'm using, and then just use your own judgment really to place a couple of drops of Typhus Corrosion and mix it up. You'll probably end up doing this 2 or 3 times to get a whole model covered. If it's a tank, obviously you're going to end up making more of this. If it's a marine or something like that, you'll probably only need to do it once, and you're aiming to get the mixture into the deepest recesses. So once you've mixed your paints together and you feel like you're ready to start applying it, you want to use a very thin, very hard brush, because I found when you use the tool, it doesn't put it in the right place. You end up spending a lot of time in one area trying to get it into the recesses. With a paintbrush, obviously you'll pick up some of the Typhus Corrosion that hasn't mixed in, as well as the paint that comes with the technical paint, or the technical pot anyway, as well as picking up the grit, which gives it a nice texture. So once you've got this mixture in all the places that you want, you can feasibly see that grit and grime would build up, it's time to move on to the next part. So I got out all the paints that I use. Some of these I mixed up, I actually got in the wrong order. At first it's supposed to be White Scar, which is the same as the highlight, and then using some Abaddon Black and then some Lead Belcher. I ended up doing them the wrong way around and having to revisit, but everyone makes mistakes, right? No one's perfect. So you start off with your highlight colour. Now, it was a friend of mine, Harry, that originally taught me this technique and doing paint chipping. And you know what? I've never actually looked back. It's been really nice to do. It's fun, it's messy, which I know I've mentioned before in previous videos. But you start off with your highlight colour, and you're then just building up on the weathering. So once you've finished the texturing with the Typhus Corrosion and your technical paint, you can then move on to the paint chipping, and then once the paint chipping's done, you then move on to further weathering with a dry brush. Obviously I use Riser Rust because it matches with the bases that I'm going for, and currently the mats that we've got for gaming are very much red, And I'm enjoying the red sort of Martian landscape. It's a nice contrast for a lot of dark models, particularly when you're going down like blacks or browns, grimdark style of painting. It's nice to have that contrast between your model and the base. So we start off with white scar, as I mentioned, and you're just sponging this on in various places where you feasibly could imagine that there'd be battle damage. A good thing to do is probably look up pictures online and stuff about tanks and armor plating. Have a look and focus on where those bits of damage will appear on a regular basis. Some of it might be wear and tear, but some of it will be from incoming fire. White is very difficult if you're using like a piece of tissue or kitchen roll and you dab it out. Try and dab it on your thumb or on your glove, depending if you use gloves, because it will give you a good idea of how much paint is still on the sponge. Now you don't want absolutely loads, but you don't want too little that it doesn't show up on the model. It is there. Unfortunately, for whatever reason, it didn't really show up on the camera very well. So I don't know why. I'm not sure, but it is there. So the next thing was, as I said, is black. Is Deobaden black. Now you can use a brown for this, or you can just go straight to using a metallic. Either way, you're going to get the same effect. But I've recently started adding in blacks and browns thanks to Mortis over on the Discord and his suggestion. You're applying the black in the same way. You're focusing on those areas, those sharp edges that are going to get chipped either from incoming fire or overuse. The stairs, the ladders, sorry, going up the side of the tank. Paint's going to get chipped off. All around the bottom edges, sharp corners, anywhere like that. Places that you could think, well, okay, if it's going through a city, it might not rub up against a building or falling debris. This is a tank that's made for war at the end of the day, so there's a whole variety of different reasons why this paint chipping could occur. So you don't just focus on one particular area. Have a look at all the different parts and try and get a nice gradient between the white going into the black and then again into the metallics. Now, for the lead Belcher, what I would definitely advise is use it straight from the pot. I've tried doing it where I've watered down the metallic first and then sponged, and because whether it's the paint or whether it's just the type of paint in particular, I'm not sure, but it ends up just making horrible splodges. It doesn't end up looking like paint chipping at all, and you end up really with this horrible mess. Now, that's just my experience. I mean, you could have a completely different experience. It could just be the pot of paint. I've been using it for a long time. But you are essentially, you're just following the same technique of essentially dry brushing, but with a sponge and a stippling effect, just to build up that level of paint chipping. So as you can see, I mean, I'm holding it a lot closer to the camera at this point because it's so subtle you can't really see the chipping. It's not till you then add a little bit of extra colour. So what I decided to do, because this is a tank, it's on a larger scale, I was thinking more along the lines of I'm going to add a bit of colour in there, so that maybe there's some wet mud or pieces of the ground that it's currently moving over has been flicked up and has made its own chip, a stone's pinged off. You look at different coloured rocks that we have on Earth. If you drive along and you knock a piece of limestone and you've got a black car, it will leave a white mark. You know, if you go past a quarry and a piece of coal flies off and hits a white car, it's going to leave a black smudge. So I decided to add a little bit of extra colour in, just stippled on some squig orange because it's similar to the Martian iron crust technical paint. So once I'd added in the extra bit of colour, it was time to go back to Typhus Corrosion. The Typhus Corrosion, once that goes on, really does give a nice layered effect for the chipping. It also, if you shake it up hard enough and you get some of the grit in the top of the pot, it also adds another layer of texture. So when you come to dry brushing on or using powders and stuff, it adds another layer of texture, which is really quite a nice sight to see. I didn't realise at first that I was picking up any grit or grime, so I ended up doing a second pass with a larger sponge with a pair of tweezers, just to make sure that I'd got some of the grit from the bottom of the pot. Occasionally there's a couple of smudges. Don't worry about that if you're using Typhus Corrosion. The smudges just add to the overall weathering effect. So now that the Typhus Corrosion has been added on top of that texture paint mix, you can see that there's a clear build up, the little bits of colour in amongst the battle damage, amongst the paint chipping, and it now actually stands out on that white armour. From here it was a case of just adding a dry brush of Riser Rust with a big tank brush. This brush pretty much only ever comes out when I'm doing tanks. It is my dedicated tank brush. It's primarily for tanks and lots of dry brushing. I know that obviously you can probably get a similar effect, if not a better effect, with using powders and stuff, but this Riser Rust from the Citadel range is actually really good for just dry brushing on. It gives a nice weathered effect, you know, from dust if you've got dry ground and stuff like that. Once it's coupled on top of wet looking texture paint like the Martian Iron Crust and Typhus Corrosion mixture, it actually gives a really nice effect that maybe this tank's been out in the battlefield for a long period of time. It's not just straight out of the depot, straight off the transport. This thing's been in the battlefield for a long time. It's taken its lumps, it's travelled around, and it looks like it's doing a job as opposed to just sat around gardening a latrine. And there we have it. Once the entire model has been touched up with the dry brush and the paint chippings as well as the texture mix, you have a fully battle damaged tank. Now personally this came out a lot better than I thought it did. It looks really good. I started working on the turret while I was waiting for things to dry on the actual hull, and once it comes all together it looks like it looks like a tank that's seen some action, and it's a really nice sight to behold. I hope you've all enjoyed the video. I hope you've all learnt something from this. If you have any questions, please don't be afraid to comment down below. And if you're enjoying what you're seeing on the channel, don't forget to like and subscribe. And I'll catch you all next time. Bye.